All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today's deep dive takes us into the heart of Exodus, chapter 14 to be exact.
Exodus 14.
You know, the one with the Israelites, the Red Sea, and,
A whole lot of drama.
yeah, you can say that again. Now, I know most folks are familiar with the basic story, but we're going deeper here.
Exactly. Peeling back the layers to uncover those hidden gems that might surprise even the most seasoned Exodus reader.
And trust me, there are plenty. So we're talking about faith, freedom, and maybe even a bit about human nature. You know, the good, the bad, and the downright perplexing.
Well, we kick things off with Pharaoh, right? Makes this grand gesture, agrees to let the Israelites go, then bam.
Changes his mind, like
Yeah.
instantly. Talk about whiplash.
It's almost comical, except not really.
No, definitely not. I mean, the guy unleashes his entire army on these former slaves.
600 chariots. The text says 600 select chariots plus all the others.
I mean, talk about overkill.
Well, it does paint a pretty vivid picture, right? The sheer force, the overwhelming odds against the Israelites. You can practically feel the sand trembling under the weight of those chariots.
And can you imagine being an Israelite in that moment? You've just escaped a life of, well, let's face it, misery. And now you're trapped.
Between a rock and a hard place, or I guess a desert and an army?
It's got to be terrifying. I mean, wouldn't you feel like, hey, maybe scrubbing floors back at Egypt wasn't so bad after all?
You'd think so, but the text doesn't exactly paint a picture of courage and grace under pressure.
No kidding. They basically freak out. I mean, they straight up tell Moses they'd rather be back in chains than die in the wilderness.
It's raw, isn't it?
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, I think, very human. You know, fear can make us act in ways we never thought possible.
Which is interesting because this is the Exodus, right? The story is all about faith.
You'd think after those plagues, the Israelites would be, I don't know, a little more trusting.
Right. But it seems like every new challenge brings a fresh wave of doubt.
Which makes me wonder, is that part of the human condition? Even when we see the impossible, do we still struggle to have faith when things get tough?
It's a question worth pondering, for sure.
Definitely.
And this is where our main man, Moses, steps in.
Oh yeah, the ultimate voice of reason.
Right. He's a stark contrast to all the panicking. He embodies this unwavering faith even when everyone is yelling at him.
I love that line.
Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord.
That's the one. It's so powerful. It's like he's saying, look, faith isn't just about believing, it's about trusting, even when you can't see the way out.
Exactly. And he's not just making this up, right?
Nope, he's following instructions. Direct line to the big guy upstairs.
This is where the story takes that turn. The supernatural, the miraculous.
The parting of the Red Sea. Can't get more epic than that.
God tells Moses to stretch out his staff and boom!
The sea just splits. It's mind-boggling. Can you imagine witnessing that? The walls of water on either side, this dry path opening up before you.
Like walking through a canyon, but made of liquid.
Exactly. And then you have the Egyptians.
Right. Why on earth would they follow the Israelites into a parted sea? I mean, come on, a little common sense here, people.
Right. Like, did they think, oh, it's just a puddle, we can totally handle this?
Maybe they were just blinded by rage, by this need to recapture the Israelites. So focused on the goal, they miss the giant, impossible obstacle right in front of them.
It does make you think about unchecked ambition, doesn't it? The way it can just cloud your judgment, lead you to disaster.
That's a fascinating interpretation. And the text does talk about the Egyptians being blinded, so maybe you're onto something.
Maybe. But here's the thing. I think this also speaks to this idea of divine intervention. It's clear God is running the show here.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just the parting of the sea. It's the whole sequence of events. The timing, the protection.
Right. Like we're told the angel of God literally moves to the back of the Israelite camp, like a divine shield.
Powerful imagery. And it makes it clear this isn't just chance. God is actively involved in their liberation.
Which makes you wonder about this relationship, right, between God and the Israelites. It's more than just, hey, I'm God, listen to me. It's like a partnership.
It certainly seems that way. And this event, this crossing, it's like a turning point. Not just in their physical journey, but in their understanding of who God is and who they are in relation to him.
It's the beginning of something much bigger, something that will unfold as they move forward. But that's a conversation for another time.
Indeed.
Well,
there's much more to explore.
Okay, so we left off with the Israelites on the other side of the Red Sea, watching the Egyptian army get, swallowed by the waves. Pretty intense stuff. But you have to wonder, what happens next? Do they instantly transform into this nation of unshakable faith?
Well, it's easy to assume that, right? I mean, talk about a life-altering experience.
Seriously. But I'm guessing it's a bit more complicated than that.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being in their shoes. You've just seen firsthand this incredible display of power. Your oppressors, gone. I mean, there's relief, sure.
Definitely. But probably a whole lot of other emotions mixed in there too, like awe, maybe even a bit of fear.
Exactly. Gratitude, confusion, maybe even a little bit of survivor's guilt. It's a cocktail of emotions, no doubt.
And I bet that experience, that mix of feelings, it shapes their understanding of God, right?
Oh, for sure. It's one thing to hear stories, to pass down traditions, but to actually witness something like that, it changes everything.
Like they go from, okay, we believe in God to, whoa, God is powerful and maybe a little terrifying.
And we see this reflected in the text itself. Exodus 14.31 tells us, Israel saw the great power that the Lord had exercised over the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord. It's not just belief, it's a deep understanding of God's might.
Makes sense. But this isn't just about fear, is it?
Yeah.
It's also about cementing this relationship, this covenant between God and the Israelites.
You're right. It's about establishing a connection, a partnership even, that will guide them moving forward.
And it's a two-way street, right? This covenant. It's not just God saying, do this, do that. The Israelites have responsibilities too.
Absolutely. It's a mutual commitment built on trust, but also on action.
And that's where the wilderness comes in, right? It's not just about escaping Egypt. It's about this journey, this process of becoming a nation.
The wilderness becomes this testing ground, you could say. They face challenges, hunger, thirst, disagreements.
And they complain a lot, which, let's be honest, is kind of understandable. They've gone from, well, slavery to this vast unknown.
Right. They're starting from scratch. No maps, no supermarkets, just faith and a promise. It's bound to create some tension.
And it makes you wonder, did that Red Sea miracle almost set them up for failure in a way?
How so?
Well, it was so big, so dramatic. Did they expect every obstacle to be overcome with a wave of God's hand? Literally.
It's possible. Maybe it created this expectation that every challenge would be met with this grand display of divine intervention. And when it wasn't, they struggled.
Right. So maybe the wilderness is about learning that faith isn't always about the big, flashy miracles.
Maybe it's about trusting God in the everyday, in the mundane, even when you can't see the way forward.
And that's a tough lesson, but a valuable one. It's about finding that strength, that resilience. When things are hard, when you're tempted to just give up. I mean, it's something we all struggle with, right?
Absolutely. We all have our own wilderness moments, those times when we feel lost, alone, unsure of what to do next.
And those are the moments when remembering that Red Sea crossing can be so powerful, not just as a story, but as a reminder. God can move mountains, but sometimes he just gives you the strength to climb them.
Beautifully put. It's about holding on to that hope, that belief that even when things seem impossible, there's a way forward.
But there's another layer to this story, right? The Red Sea crossing, it's seen as this great victory, but it also involves the destruction of an entire army.
That's a tough one, no doubt. How do we reconcile this idea of a loving God with such a devastating event?
Right. It's not an easy question. And there are many different interpretations.
Some see it as divine judgment, a consequence of Pharaoh's actions. Others focus on the idea of free will, the choices we make and the consequences that follow.
And I think it's okay to wrestle with these questions, to acknowledge the complexity of the text, the difficult parts that don't fit neatly into our understanding.
It's in those gray areas, in those uncomfortable spaces, that we often find the most growth, the most profound insights. It's easy to celebrate the victories, but it's the struggles that really shape us.
So the Red Sea crossing is a story of triumph, yes, but it's also a story that invites us to grapple with difficult questions, to dig deeper into our faith, and to acknowledge that sometimes the answers aren't easy or straightforward.
And that's okay. The journey is just as important as the destination.
All right, so we've walked through this incredible story, right? The Israelites escape Egypt, the Red Sea parts. It's a pivotal moment. Shapes their identity, their faith, their future, the whole 9 yards. But then what? Do they just skip off into the sunset, straight to the promised land? Problem solved.
Oh, if only it were that simple.
Right. So what happens next? I mean, it can't be all sunshine and rainbows, right?
Well, think about it. The crossing, it's just the beginning. The promised land, it's still way out there. And in between, the wilderness. A vast, unforgiving, wilderness.
Makes those complaints we talked about, the grumbling in the desert, a little more understandable. I mean, they've traded, okay, maybe not the best situation, but at least a familiar one for this complete unknown.
Exactly. They're starting from scratch. No society, no structure, just, well, a whole lot of sand and a promise.
Talk about culture shock. So it's easy for us to sit back and say, oh, I have a little faith, guys. But put yourself in their sandals. You've just seen this incredible miracle, but then day after day, it's just survival. Finding food, water, dealing with, desert sunburn.
It tests you, right? Tests your limits, your faith, your everything. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point.
So the wilderness, it's not just a physical place. It's like a metaphor.
Oh, absolutely. It represents those internal struggles, the doubts, the temptations, the things that make you want to turn back, to give up.
And maybe, thinking back to that Red Sea miracle, maybe it was, almost too easy, too spectacular.
Meaning?
Well, did it set up this expectation that every problem would be solved with this grand divine intervention? And when it wasn't, they panicked.
It's an interesting thought. Maybe the wilderness was about learning that faith isn't always about those big, flashy miracles.
Right. Maybe it's about trusting God in the quiet moments, the everyday struggles, even when you can't see the path ahead. That's a powerful lesson, and honestly, one I think we can all relate to.
For sure. We all have our wilderness moments, those times when we feel lost, alone, and unsure of what to do next.
Exactly. And in those moments, it can be so easy to forget the Red Sea, to forget what's possible. But the Israelites, they carry that experience with them.
Literally, of course.
Yeah, not literally, but as a memory, as a reminder of God's power of what can happen when you trust, even when it seems impossible. It gave them hope.
And that's what we have to hold on to, right? That hope. Even in the midst of our own struggles, our own wilderness moments. That belief that there's a way forward.
It's like they weren't just wandering aimlessly. They had a destination, a purpose. And even when things got tough, they kept moving one step at a time towards that promise.
And they had each other, right? This community bound together by shared experience, a common goal. That's powerful. That's what helps us through those tough times, that sense of belonging, of knowing you're not alone.
It's a great point. We're not meant to walk through our wilderness moments alone. We need that support, that reminder that we're all in this together.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Exodus 14, I want to leave you with a question. What are your Red Sea moments? Those experiences that have shaped you, challenged you, giving you a glimpse of something bigger than yourself?
And how do those experiences continue to guide you today? Because the lessons of Exodus, they're not just ancient history. They're alive, they're relevant, they're here to help us navigate our own journeys.
Absolutely. And remember, even in the midst of the wilderness, there's always hope for a promised land.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the faith.